We're not just even merely surviving in 2013, we're thriving today because of the fact that our ancestors wouldn't give up those things that were important to them during the mission system and afterwards.
In 1816, October 4th, is the feast day of St. Francis of Assisi, and the native people are in their traditional dress. We have Europeans documenting native people's dancing in traditional costume, traditional regalia, feather headdress, skirts, all these wonderful things. And if you look close to the drawing, you see the two padres standing by the gate watching. So it's not like this was done unsanctioned, as it were. So, okay, you kind of figure out, well, what's going on here? So then you go back into the literature and you read the padre who's living here at the time as native peoples are coming in. And the padre writes, in the native world, in the Indian world, we are told by our Indians who are coming in that the most respected person in community was the person responsible for taking care of the dance regalia. And that person held it. And when that person decided it was a reason for us to dance, he or she would pass out the regalia. So the padre writes, and the native peoples has transferred this devotion of leadership to the padre. Because as they come into the missions, they present their regalia, their feather headdresses, their skirts, and their whistles, and their flutes, and all these other items to the padre to care for. I say, let's read between the lines. These native peoples knew that if they gave it to the padre, they would pump up the padre. Anybody would see how they like me. I'm such a do-gooder. And he won't destroy the stuff. And then when our bona fide do-gooder feels good, he'll let us dance. Now you go through the records and you look at the dates when we have records that the padres said, Indians, go ahead and dance. And oh, by the way, here's your traditional regalia. Sometimes we see the dances are recorded on Easter, on Christmas, at different times of the year, and you look to the calendar and you go, oh, solstice dates, equinox dates, all deal because the Christian calendar is rooted in a pagan calendar that talks about all the dates of creation. And so my theory on this, the way I read it, is the native peoples were able to take their culture underground. They found ways to literally fool the priest. And they were now, when they were dancing, if there had been 20 baptisms that day, maybe they were providing traditional initiation rites. If there had been marriages that weren't solemnized in the native world, now they're solemnizing those marriages. If it was at Christmas or Easter time, we're talking the cosmology world of solstice and equinox. And the native world is connected to those religions or to those moments in our life.
It's interesting how everything that my grandmother, my grandfather, my aunts, my uncles would tell me, it matches perfectly to things that are written in research and dissertations and that are in the mission registers, that are in the Harrington notes. If the oral tradition didn't exist, our language wouldn't exist today. If the oral tradition didn't exist, we wouldn't know anything about our religion, about our songs, about our dances. That's one way that things survived for us. And if we put pieces together from the documentation that we have available, that was all passed down through the oral tradition, that is going to help us.
Well, we've been here on record 13 to 14,000 years, but our people, our stories run from the beginning of time. We call them creation stories. You know, change was something strange to our people. Over the hill in the Ukiah Valley, they had it really hard because the Spanish had hit their people, and the stories our people heard, and I heard this through my great-grandfather, who heard it through his family. And he told me that over on the other side of the hill, in the Ukiah Valley area, the Spaniards had hit the people and had taken everything that they had. They almost left them with nothing. They beat them for speaking their language. They took their husbands and hung their husbands. They take their children and take them away to missions. And it didn't stop, because then again came boarding schools, and the children were taken off to boarding schools. Nothing in history always is happy, and there's always good and bad to everything. But You know, if we hold on to that ugliness, if we hold on to that, we're going to have that hate in our life, and we're going to carry that, and we're going to teach our children that. And that's why it's part of our history, but it's not part of our future. And that's how we change, by letting our children know that that's history, but it's not future, and we can change that, you know.
I'm very grateful because some of these stories that have been passed down to me, that have continued on for thousands of years, that adapted to different languages, such as Spanish and now they're passed down in English. I was able to translate 2 of those stories back into Chochenyo, and now I teach my brother those stories in Chochenyo. So it's this huge reversal that we see happen, from going to not having a whole lot to having a lot in a relatively short amount of time.
In today's society, there hasn't been any room for cultural integrity. It's coming about, but I think we have to put that cultural integrity responsibility in the hands of young people.
Right now, we don't have, in my opinion, the dances back as I would like to see them back yet. That doesn't mean we can't have them back in the future. And when I see my little brother, for an example, when I walk in the house and I see him speak to me first in Chochenyo, when I see him do these things, and I see like this next generation aware in ways that I wasn't aware as a kid, we wouldn't have any of this if it weren't for our ancestors continuing on these stories. It would have been, so to speak, easier in some ways for them just to let them go and continue on with the Spanish ways, but they didn't. And it's a good thing that they didn't, because I always think of how I see my grandparents. You know, they're these proud, stubborn people, and that gives me a lot of hope, because I know that that's how my ancestors were also. These stubborn people, and they're stubborn for the right reasons, because they refused to give up these things that were sacred to them, that were important to them, and they kept them going.
So that's where I'm saying, as oppressed people, as we know this in any culture in the world, when oppressed, people take their traditional items, their traditional ways, their traditional rituals underground, and you protect them. They're secret now, and you share them privately in the house, but not in public. And then when the time of liberation comes, it all comes back. And that's what I believe. As we have our oral tradition, we know the dance rituals, we know some of the prayers, we know an understanding through our stories of creation, of all the creatures that were involved. The native peoples, the religion and spirituality continue today because people kept it with them. They never let it go.